explain. You see, when we get to rabbinic sources, we see that the rabbis are talking all over the place about halachic positions regarding how Jews should relate to other Jews. Now, some of you may have read this very long review in the Long Island Jewish World that I wrote of Boteach book. Now, despite the fact that I can't agree with his crazy ideas about how we should reclaim Jesus and make him into Jewish hero and teacher, but the reality is that a lot of the stuff we hear from our Christian friends about love of neighbor and all this stuff, as if it's a Christian idea, these are ideas that are common in the Bible and, of course, come from our Bible and also are discussed at great length in Talmudic sources. But what I want to point out is that the type of thing that you see in the extremism of a group like the Dead Sea Scroll sect, where they hate everybody outside, or Jews fighting against Jews and killing Jews in Second Temple times, all of these things that we're talking about here are actually opposed in the halachic positions of the rabbis. And let me just give a few examples. And this goes way beyond the question of the criticism of people who appear to be religious extremists, because actually, in rabbinic sources, the criticism of people who appear to be extremists is a criticism of harmless religious behavior. And I think we have to realize that. That is to say, harmless religious behavior means that, for example, if you believe that the restrooms in your house have to be kosher for Pesach, right? And I don't mean getting rid of, so it used to be chumetz in the medicine, there isn't anymore. But okay, if you believe that you got to pour boiling water over the sinks and other parts of the facilities, right? You're not hurting anybody except your floor, maybe, if you spill the water through the floor, but you're not hurting anybody. But on the other hand, if you believe that nobody who doesn't meet your standards should be in your synagogue, and you walk around to people in the synagogue and say, "What are you doing here? I saw you eating this candy bar and I don't think it's kosher. You have no right to come to my synagogue," then you're already hurting people, let alone if you shoot people or attack them because you don't think they're doing the right thing. So the point I'm making is much of the rabbinic condemnation is against behavior which they regard to be crazy, but it's behavior which is harmless. But what I want to point out is that more importantly, the whole positive sense in rabbinic sources about loving your fellow Jew and about the unity of the Jewish people, and these things come up in the specific commandments of love, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. They come up in books like the Sefer HaChinuch and Maimonides' Code and Shulchan Aruch later on. All of these things basically represent a completely opposite approach to the type of approach of fanaticism in which people are simply rejected until people hit a certain level of transgression. If they hit this level of transgression, that's another story, right? Then in the Middle Ages, they expelled people from the community and this, that, and the other thing. But the offenses here have to get pretty bad before that happens. So generally, however, the rabbis read the sources, including the biblical sources, in such a way as most sources that fanatics would base themselves on are no longer valid. Example, we just went through our annual remembrance of Amalek. Now, Amalek is supposed to be the descendants of a group that actually attacked the Jews in a treacherous manner, whom we are commanded to extirpate. However, we have a halachic ruling which says that we don't know who they are, therefore we can't extirpate them. And in fact, this notion has turned into a symbol of evil. So there's now no longer any person who is Amalek. So therefore you don't destroy any person, you destroy a moral evil. And the ultimate carrying on of this thing is that in a discourse of the next to last Lubavitcher Rebbe, repeated by the present Lubavitcher Rebbe, the discourse claims that Amalek is nothingness, because the ultimate of evil is nothingness. Now you see what's happened here. The evolution from a group that is to be destroyed to an unidentifiable group that you therefore can't destroy, to a symbol of evil that you can destroy, and to evil being really the absence of good, which is Maimonides' philosophical view about evil. But you notice that in all of this, there's no longer any place for fanatical behavior against the group because they don't exist. Same with the Canaanites. You think, I got a great idea. I'm a Meshuggah right-wing Israeli. So I want to go after the Arabs because they're the Canaanites. Come the rabbis tell you, guess what? We don't know who the Canaanites are anymore. Since the Canaanites got mixed up with everybody, you know they are, there is no mitzvah to destroy the Canaanites. In fact, it's forbidden to destroy the Canaanites because if we don't know who they are, God forbid you're destroying the wrong person, you're committing murder. and so on. It goes like this, that in Halacha, what has happened is that the very acts which today's fanatics might want to commit become forbidden. I will tell you in parenthesis that I once took out the memorial volume to Baruch Goldstein from a hidden part of a certain library because I wanted to see if a certain individual had given a certain speech. Rabbi Lerner may remember the story that somebody announced a lecture by this individual, and I said that he was a crazy nut and that we shouldn't continue to announce his lecture. And he spoke to his brother in Israel and said I was right, and I read this volume because I wanted to make sure I was right. And in this volume I found, how do you deal with that? If you're a real fanatic, you have to find a way of dealing with it. So the guy had invented a new idea. It's possible to become Amalek. If the guy can become Amalek, then we could kill him. Well, okay, very nice. It's very not halakhic. It's totally anti-halakhic, because in halakha, what has happened is these forms of extremism that could be drawn from actions that were undertaken by the Israelites when they entered Canaan in order to destroy the idolaters and take over Canaan are all illegal in rabbinic halakha. So the point I want to make is that not only these actions against non-Jews, but certainly the actions against Jews whom you command to love and whatever, and no matter what they do, to understand that if they must be brought to repentance, they have the potential of repentance. All of these things are forbidden too. So the actions which the Sicarii undertook against their fellow Jews, all these things are forbidden by rabbinic halakha. So essentially, the fanaticism of the extreme is all forbidden. Now, with this stuff, we are now going to make a jump to the modern period. Because everything I told you so far is part of the historical background of what we're talking about today, but we need to go into now certain facts about the nature of the society that we deal with that emerges when Judaism confronts modernity. Now, you probably all know that the standard model for understanding Judaism when it confronted modernity is the following. That as a result of the confrontation with modernity, the standard model is correct. I didn't mean it in the sense that it's wrong. It's right. This is it. As a result of the confrontation with modernity, Judaism, which was basically traditional, split into a whole variety of traditionalist and other approaches. And with the granting of emancipation, which means complete freedom in a society, big irony, they were granted emancipation in Germany and we know what it led to, but leave that aside. You become a full citizen, and when you become a full citizen, the Jewish community can no longer compel you to observe, and now you have all the choices before you. As a result of which, in the modern period, there are all kinds of choices that come into the Jewish people. Now, among these choices are to be traditionally religious or not to be religious, to set up alternative religious movements like Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, to set up movements to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine like Zionism. All of these things are developments that happen as a result of modernity. Now, in particular, modernity gave birth to what are the competing views of Jewish life today and of Jewish life in Israel. You can't understand any of this fanaticism without realizing how this happened. So I want to go through some of these reactions just so it becomes clear. So the first thing to understand is the splintering of the Jewish people in Western Europe into Orthodox and Reform, in Eastern Europe much more so into Orthodox versus Yiddishist socialist and socialist in general. Now, what happened is that the Eastern European model was imported to Israel, and in the